Cape Town's unyielding physical presence stands in stark contrast to its ever-shifting social landscape. Although colonization and slavery played their part, in the 20th century, apartheid was to drastically change the face of the city.
I don't know if you've discovered this bit of Bo-Kaap, but Bo-Kaap was the only coloured community close to the city centre. The coloured community on the other side in District 6 was already moved through the Group Areas Act of the time. And there were lots of rumours that Bo-Kaap itself, the people living there, was also going to be moved.
The Group Areas Act is considered to be one of the pillars of apartheid. In 1957, the district of the Bo-Kaap was declared a Cape Malay area.
So-called black people were moved out of the area, sent to Ndabeni. Indian people had to go to Indian areas. Hindu people had to go to Indian areas. Jewish and Portuguese people, because they were also declared under the so-called white population group, had to get out of the area. And that is what changed the area from the 1930s onwards, where it then became a predominantly Muslim area.
Our policy is one which is called by an Afrikaans word apartheid. And I'm afraid that has been misunderstood so often. It could just as easily, and perhaps much better, be described as a policy of good neighborliness, accepting that there are differences between people. But while these differences exist, and you have to acknowledge them, at the same time, you can live together, aid one another, but that it can best be done when you act as good neighbors always do.
People own properties in a Bo-Kaap, but with the apartheid system,
they declare the area slum.
Slum area, yes, and they claim the properties of the people themselves and rent it out to them again.
There was no forced removals here. The place wasn't crowded. People looked after their places. The houses wasn't dilapidated.
No, we weren't like. No, we never worried about moving. We just stood steadfast here.
It wasn't like in the Waterkant where you see, the Bo-Kaap was designated as a Cape Malay coloured area. Yeah. So what happened within the area, there was Indian communities that also stayed in the area, especially on Leven Street side. And some of them, I mean, there was a few families that were removed and they were sent to Rylands, but then there were other families that basically had to cheat the system. My father's from an Indian origin, but yet my mother's from a Malay, but our surname was still an Indian surname, Tisika. So what my great-grandfather done when the Group Areas Act came into effect, he took his first name and turned it into his surname, which is Sali. So basically, Sali is like a Malay surname, and that was the only reason that he could stay in the area.
The Malays live to a great degree apart from the ordinary life of Cape Town. But there are occasions when the Malays display one aspect of their rigid communal life for all to see. One such is the gay festival of the New Year, not the modern New Year, but the Christian holiday on January the 1st.
The whole notion of Malay as being a very self-contained, rigid category, ethnic category, becomes entrenched in the 1950s, a little bit earlier perhaps, 1940s, 1950s, with the idea that as racial classification becomes all pervasive in South African society, there develops this notion that the Malay is a distinct kind of person, a distinct race, if you like. And there's a lot of controversy about this, but I think it's quite clear that a lot of that was to do with the writings and the activities of Du Plessis, who was promoting the idea of the distinctive Malay.
He wrote about the Bo-Kaap, and he had projects in the Bo-Kaap, and he came across as somebody who was interested in the local community, so people accepted him, and a lot of his politics stayed in the area.
And the Bo-Kaap then becomes the group area in which this group of people, as defined by apartheid legislation, are allowed to live in. So it's then that this idea of the very distinct area, I think, really gets entrenched.
On Old Year's Eve, resplendent in their finery, they begin to move about the quarter, retaining their natural dignity, even in the heat of South African midsummer, serenading outside the homes of friends. The choirs have done South African culture a great service by preserving the folk songs, sometimes intact, sometimes in a form strangely modified by passage down the years, such songs as the famous Alabama, the history of the Confederate privateer which took a fiddle ride within sight of Signal Hill.
Cape Malay is like a packet of licorice all sorts.
It's a Muslim, Cape Malay, like they say, we Cape Malays.
And they came from, what is it now? What is the country's name?
Malaysia and what is the other place? Singapore?
Malaysia, Indonesia,
And Java.
Java.
That's why where the name Malay originated from.
It is like a generation thing, no? The Malay.
The Malay,
It's a cultural thing.
They were called Malay like
Those years ago.
in the 14th century, way back, because they were slaves.
Slaves that came from Malaysia.
Malaysia, yeah.
Just being from a Islamic background, being Cape coloured, but also Malay in terms of being a Muslim.
Some people refer to us as Cape Malays, being Muslims from the Cape.
This evening is that we are going to sight the moon for Eid al-Fitr, but after we have fasted the whole month of Ramadan. So if we sight the moon, then tomorrow will be Eid. If you don't sight the moon, then it will be the 30 days.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Ashhadu an la ilaha.
Slaves came to the Cape from a very wide range of areas across the Indian Ocean world. But I think in relation to the Bo-Kaap, the interesting part of the Indian Ocean that they came from was that of Southeast Asia. They came from very diverse areas, but they tended to more closely associate with each other. And part of that is because of a common cultural background. Part of it also a common religious background, because many of them were Muslim.
Under Dutch rule, it was illegal to practice Islam, and thus exiles would meet for prayer on Signal Hill and in the quarry just outside of town.
I'm proud to say in Bo-Kaap because people fought to embrace our traditions, our cultures here.
The area began to develop significance for the Cape Muslim community in the 17th and 18th century.
The kramats are these sites, these holy places where old senior religious people are buried. And if you look at where they are located around Cape Town, then this part of Cape Town, Bo-Kaap, the center of the city, and District 6, and then going into the Cape Flats. is an area that is spiritually protected for Muslims.
The moon has not been sighted throughout South Africa. The moon has not been sighted. So inshallah ta'ala, Wednesday the 31st of August will be Eid.
Debat. Those eyes into the gravy.